the Aftercare Toolkit.
Thank you very much, Francesca, and it's a pleasure to be here, and we're so thrilled to have such a good audience from right around the world tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, IFAR has conducted a number of these forums around the world over the last few years, and we've been very fortunate to learn from some outstanding speakers. The IFAR Steering Committee has selected 6 practical strategies that any jurisdiction can put in place to either begin or enhance their aftercare journey. It's my pleasure, on behalf of this steering committee, to present a framework which we call the Aftercare Toolkit. The first strategy relates to life cycle management and specifically the rules of racing and traceability. Racing's regulatory powers relate to the racing phase of a horse's life. Traceability systems from other animal industries are establishing new community expectations, however. Society expects the regulator to know who the licensed animals are and where they are throughout their life. Now, for racing, this has critical implications because we have no jurisdiction when horses leave the industry. So let's consider the early phases of a horse's life. Some countries like the UK and Australia have moved to extend their regulatory oversight back up the supply chain and have implemented traceability obligations on the breeding sector. In those countries, racing authorities must be notified of the birth and the identification and location of a foal within 30 days of birth. Foal movements must be registered with authorities, and breeding stock may be subject to out-of-competition drug testing at any time. Racing authorities around the world should investigate methods to either secure regulatory oversight or partner with their breed registries to help achieve traceability. The second aspect of traceability relates to the horse's post-racing career. Rules can be put in place to establish visibility regarding the horse's first exit from racing. Notification rules were first implemented in Australia in 2014 and have been adopted by several countries, including New Zealand and South Africa. Now, this rule places an obligation on the owner or their agent to notify the authorities of when a horse is retired. Information may also be requested, such as the reason for retirement and destination post-racing. We understand that Racing Australia receives approximately 7,000 notifications of retirement each year. Their 2020 data reveals that 60% of horses off the track continue their careers in the equestrian world, while another 19% go to the breeding industry. 10% are euthanized, 7% die of natural causes, 2% go to official retirement programs, and 2% have other exit destinations. Racing Australia publishes racehorse retirement every year in its annual report. Now, activists in the media attacked the Racing Australia framework in 2019, as Tom showed earlier in this presentation, and they made certain claims regarding the numbers of thoroughbreds going to abattoirs. Now, the Racing Australia data doesn't account for movements of horses or horse deaths after the first point of exit and doesn't claim to do so. It is data about the first exit destination of horses when they leave the track. Now, unfortunately, such nuances are easy to be glossed over in a media frenzy, but importantly, there is a framework in place, there is data being collected, and there is transparency as the statistics are published. Now, the more challenging question relates to traceability beyond the horse's first exit from the racing industry, and racing does not have regulatory power in the community. Legislation is the only way in which thoroughbred traceability can be comprehensively delivered beyond first exit. Yet no countries have a holistic equine traceability legislative framework. And key questions remain as to who is responsible for oversight of horses in the general community and who should operate and fund a traceability system. A national working group is currently considering these questions in the Australian context. But fortunately, putting in place rules of racing do not demand significant financial resources, and there are opportunities for every racing jurisdiction to emulate best practice. We call our second set of strategies transitioning strategies. The community expects that racing must invest in its horses beyond the track. Our traditional approach has been to allow the market dynamics of the equestrian world to dictate post-racing outcomes. As identified, Australia's data indicates that 60% of horses leaving the racetrack enter the equestrian industry in some capacity. So finding ways to improve the transition of off-the-track thoroughbreds to the equestrian industry is very important. So the strategies can be divided into those that increase the supply of horses to equestrian markets and those that stimulate demand from those markets. So when you begin to think about the strategies for your jurisdiction, consider if the program increases supply or increases demand. Supply side strategies increase the number of horses entering the equestrian market. And supply side strategies include where racing authorities directly fund the retraining of racehorses themselves or through third parties. They may provide subsidies to retrainers or own and operate facilities themselves. Another supply side approach relates to implementing quality assurance programs for retrainers and their facilities. And jurisdictions like Racing Victoria have approved retrainer programs. Racing authorities have no regulatory authority beyond the racing industry. However, voluntary participation in quality assurance schemes will support good welfare outcomes. One of the best examples of this is the US's Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, or the TAA, and they administer a comprehensive national program of quality assurance linked to grant funding. Supply side strategies are most effective if there is a concurrent increase in demand. Demand side strategies create interest in off-the-track thoroughbreds. Sponsorship can be used to boost equestrian prize money for thoroughbred class events, with conditions requiring that the thoroughbred is an off-the-track thoroughbred. It then becomes lucrative for riders to compete on an off-the-track thoroughbred compared to other breeds. And equestrian riders will begin to actively seek out off-the-track thoroughbreds. And of course, it also supports the business model of existing retrainers. Sponsorship strategies are scalable, meaning that racing jurisdictions can initially launch with modest funding and there is no capital investment required. In the US, the Retired Racehorse Project is an excellent example where a marquee event can stimulate demand and raise the profile of the breed. Now, other initiatives can help stimulate demand include implementing supportive administrative processes that smooth the transition between racing and equestrian. If we can remove the friction, we can make it easy for people to transition horses from one administrative regime to another. The US Jockey Club has a program called the Thoroughbred Incentive Program, or TIP numbers, which provides off-the-track thoroughbreds with a unique identifier that allows a horse to compete in a wide range of sponsored equestrian disciplines. Now, the third area includes those areas which create a safety net for horses in need. As we can all appreciate, horses have different temperaments and different levels of athletic ability. Accordingly, our strategies need to address all of that diversity. Now, of course, elite horses will find homes easily, and the middle majority of horses will benefit from the supply and the demand strategies which I've just outlined. But it's the bottom tier, and they represent the horses who, for some reason or another, will not make it to the breeding shed or to an equestrian home. They might have injuries, they might have an unsuitable temperament, or they might not simply be athletic. Now, these horses need different strategies as they have the potential to become the horses at risk. Now, fortunately, there are low-cost administrative solutions that can form the foundation of a safety net. The US Trotting Association led the way in this space with a program called Full Circle. The program entails building database fields in the horse registry that permits an interested person nominating themselves to be contacted in the event that their nominated horse ever fell into an at-risk situation. There's no cost to participate and no enduring obligation for the nominee to provide support. They simply have the option to provide support if they choose. The horse registry accepts the responsibility to coordinate and share the details of the respective parties if required. And this approach has the benefit of extending industry support beyond that first exit point from industry. There's a few other safety net approaches as well, and the others are more interventionist and they require more resources. So that might include providing funding or sponsorship to various horse rescues or charities. Racing authorities may choose to be more hands-on and consider having a dedicated crisis response funding or even purchase or lease rescue facilities. Very clearly, different models will suit different operating environments. We call our fourth set of strategies equine therapy and community engagement. There are tremendous opportunities for racing to link to charities that utilise horses, including off-the-track thoroughbreds, for therapeutic or rehabilitation programs. There are many successful programs that support war veterans, people with disadvantages or disabilities, or disadvantaged kids. And some programs are integrated into correctional facilities to assist with inmate rehabilitation. The Man of War project in the US is a groundbreaking research study that seeks to determine the effectiveness of equine therapy to treat veterans who suffer from PTSD. Now, these programs represent excellent opportunities for racing to link with meaningful social causes. Racing needs to promote and, if necessary, support or fund the use of off-the-track thoroughbreds as part of these programs. Racing has an important role to promote the thoroughbred to the equestrian market, and we call the fifth item in the toolkit Thoroughbred Advocacy. At the 2017 IFAR Forum, US Olympian Boyd Martin advised us that over the years, the equestrian market in the US had trended towards the use of warm bloods and other sport horse breeds. Accordingly, the demand for off-the-track thoroughbreds declined, which put pressure on the business model of retrainers working with thoroughbreds. They had less demand for thoroughbreds, and there were fewer opportunities for racing to pass through their horses to those retrainers. We need to celebrate the success of our off-the-track heroes and ensure that the popularity of the thoroughbred as a versatile equestrian athlete is not allowed to decline. We also need to advocate for the aftercare work that we do and communicate that to the community. Racing authorities need to dedicate resources to building a narrative around the aftercare strategies that jurisdiction has in place. Racing, in fact, needs to be the strongest advocate for the thoroughbred breed and for the work that the industry does. The final strategy is to engage in networking. Now, IFAR is fully appreciative that there is a tremendous diversity in the nature of racing industries around the world. There's diversity in community expectations and diversity in approaches to aftercare. Your country may not yet have aftercare on your agenda, or you may not think that you need to fund aftercare initiatives. But from IFAR's perspective, we believe that you need to make a start. Society is changing and racing must evolve. Racing authorities shouldn't need an excuse to reach out and engage with the Equestrian Federation in their country. Are there administration arrangements that could be discussed that could help smooth that ownership transition from racing to equestrian? Are there sponsorship opportunities? Are there charities operating in your jurisdiction? Can you initiate or support an aftercare social media network in your country? Is there a person in your jurisdiction whose job it is to work on aftercare? IFAR's Aftercare Toolkit has been developed following several years of reviewing best practice from around the world. This slide demonstrates that the toolkit strategies can touch every point in a horse's life. The strategies are practical and cost-effective and are available for any racing jurisdiction to put in place. And so in closing, I would like to stress the importance for all racing nations to make a start. Racing faces a level of scrutiny and activist challenge that it has never encountered before. Community expectations are evolving and racing needs to adapt and put in place new strategies in order to survive. A caring industry will be a sustainable industry. At IFAR, our mission is to promote the care of thoroughbred horses during their lifetime. We want to see aftercare structurally embedded in the racing business model of every country and in the heart of every racing participant. At IFAR, we're available to provide advice to racing jurisdictions and work with you regarding which strategies will work best in your country. Thank you, Francesca.